So, try to wrap your head around this. You're hiking alone in Washington State's Olympic Mountains. The fog is thick, everything is quiet, and suddenly, a baby panda appears out of nowhere and starts begging you, yes, literally begging you to follow her. What would you do? That's exactly what happened last fall to Amber Wilson, a 34-year-old mountain hiker from Colorado. She wasn't expecting company. She definitely wasn't expecting a panda, but there it was, standing upright on the trail with its paws pressed together, staring at her like its life depended on what she did next. The cub chirped once, twice, grabbed Amber's jacket and yanked hard. "Whoa, okay, Amber said, but the cub was already running toward the trees, checking over her shoulder to make sure Amber was following. Here's the thing, wild animals don't do this. They don't trust humans. They don't ask for help. So why was this cub acting like Amber was her only hope? What was waiting in those trees that scared this baby so much she'd risk everything to lead a stranger there? What Amber found changed everything. Seriously, you're going to want to see what happens next. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. And we would love to know, would you have followed that cub, or would you have walked away? Be honest in the comments. Now let's go find out how Amber got there in the first place. The Olympic Mountains wore their fog like a shroud that morning, thick and gray and swallowing everything beyond 20 feet. Amber Wilson kept her eyes on the trail ahead, boots grinding against loose gravel with each step. Her backpack pulled at her shoulders, 40 pounds of gear she'd packed the night before. Breath in, breath out, controlled, steady. The only sounds were her footsteps and the distant call of a hawk somewhere above the mist. She'd chosen this trail because no one else would be here. That was the whole point. A blur of movement crossed her path. Amber slammed to a stop, arms shooting out for balance. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. She blinked once, twice, trying to make sense of what stood directly in front of her. A baby panda, right there, dead center on the trail, trembling so hard her fur seemed to ripple. Amber's breath caught. Pandas didn't live in Washington. They didn't live anywhere near here. This wasn't possible, yet the cub was real. Solid. Her black eyes locked onto Amber's face with an intensity that made Amber's skin prickle. The cub didn't run. She rose slowly onto her hind legs, balancing awkwardly, and pressed her tiny paws together. Begging. Actually begging. The expression on that small face hit Amber like a fist to the chest. Fear, desperation, hope, all of it directed at her. "Hey," Amber whispered, lowering herself into a crouch. "What are you doing out here, little one?" The cub took a hesitant step forward. Another. Her chirp was soft, almost questioning. Amber extended one hand slowly, palm up, trying to project calm. But the cub didn't sniff her fingers or back away. Instead, she pressed her paws against Amber's knee and looked up with those impossibly dark eyes. A haunting chirp echoed through the fog. Louder this time. Urgent. The cub whipped around and bolted toward the tree line. Amber stood frozen. The cub stopped after 10 feet, glanced back and chirped again, waited, checked to see if Amber was following. When Amber didn't move, the cub took another few steps and repeated the motion. Stop. Look back. Chirp. The message was unmistakable. Follow me. Every rational thought in Amber's head screamed at her to stay on the marked trail. She'd hiked these mountains for 8 years. She knew the rules. Never leave the path. Never follow wildlife. Never take unnecessary risks. That's what she'd promised herself after what happened in Colorado. But this cub wasn't acting like wildlife. She was acting like someone drowning who'd just spotted a lifeguard. Amber's hands moved before her mind caught up. She swung her pack around, yanked open the main compartment, and grabbed her rope, water bottle, and emergency kit, stuffed them into her smaller day pack, clipped her gear to her belt. The cub chirped frantically, pacing back and forth at the edge of the trees. "Okay," Amber breathed. "Okay, I'm coming." She followed the cub off the trail. The fog thickened immediately, wrapping around Amber like cold fingers. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in as many seconds. Pine needles cushioned her steps, but underneath them the ground was loose, unstable. The cub moved with surprising speed, weaving between trees and over fallen logs, constantly checking to make sure Amber was still behind her. Amber's lungs burned. The slope pitched downward, steep enough that she had to grab branches to keep from sliding. How far had they gone? 3 minutes? 5? The world had shrunk to the small black and white shape ahead of her, and the sound of her own ragged breathing. The cub stopped. Amber nearly crashed into her. They stood at the edge of a deep ravine, a wound in the earth maybe 30 feet wide and twice as deep. Jagged rocks lined the bottom. The cub walked right to the edge and cried out, a sound so piercing it seemed to vibrate in Amber's bones. "What is it?" Amber whispered. "What's down there?" She dropped to her stomach and crawled forward until her head hung over the edge, squinted into the shadows. At first, she saw only darkness and stone. Then her eyes adjusted. A massive panda lay crumpled at the bottom of the ravine, half buried beneath a pile of boulders. Adult, female. Her sides heaved with shallow, desperate breaths. One leg was pinned beneath the rocks. Dark marks stained the fur along her shoulder. Her eyes were half closed, unfocused, fading. Amber's throat tightened. The mother. This cub had led her to her mother. "I'm here," Amber whispered, not sure if the panda could even hear her. "I'll help, I promise." The cub chirped again, softer now, and pressed against Amber's side. Amber wrapped one arm around the trembling body and stared down at the fading panda below. Her mind was already racing. Rope, anchor point, descent gear. She could do this. She had to do this. A low growl echoed from somewhere deep in the trees behind them. Amber's blood went ice cold. She turned her head slowly, scanning the fog. Nothing moved. But the growl came again, closer this time, deeper. The cub flattened against the ground, making herself as small as possible. What would you do in her place? Comment below. Something was out there in the fog. Something that had smelled vulnerability and injury and opportunity. Amber's hand moved to the survival tool on her belt as she pulled the cub closer. "Stick with me, what happens next?" shocked rescue teams across the country. Amber forced herself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The growl hadn't come again, but that didn't mean whatever made it had left. She turned back to the ravine, eyes scanning the terrain with the methodical focus of someone who'd spent years reading mountains. The slope was a nightmare. Loose pine needles covered everything like a slick carpet, hiding the true condition of the ground beneath. Rocks jutted out at odd angles, some solid, others ready to give way at the slightest pressure. The ravine wall itself had partially collapsed, leaving a jagged scar of exposed dirt and root systems. One wrong step and she'd tumble straight down to where the mother panda lay trapped. The cub nudged Amber's arm with her nose. Hard, insistent. She paced 3 steps toward the edge, looked back, paced 3 steps away. Her anxiety was contagious. Amber could feel it crawling under her skin, making her hands shake. "I know," Amber whispered. "I'm working on it." She pulled her pack closer and studied the mother panda again from above. The damage looked fresh, still dark and wet against the black fur. The pinned leg was bent at an angle that made Amber's stomach turn, but it was the breathing that worried her most. Shallow, labored. Each breath seemed to take more effort than the last. The mother's oxygen was fading. Fast. How long had she been trapped down there? Hours? A full day? Amber's mind flashed back without permission. Colorado, 4 years ago, a climbing accident on a group expedition. Marcus trapped beneath an overhang, leg shattered, hypothermia setting in. She'd been part of a 6-person rescue team. They'd argued about the approach. Wasted 30 minutes debating anchor points and descent angles while Marcus's temperature dropped degree by degree. By the time they reached him, he was unconscious. He survived, but barely. The doctors said 15 more minutes and he wouldn't have made it. Amber had stopped joining group hikes after that. Stopped trusting committees and discussions and safety meetings. When someone needed help, you moved. You didn't debate. She shook the memory away and grabbed her rope. 60 feet of Kermantle, rated for climbing. She'd need an anchor point. Her eyes swept the area and locked onto a thick pine root that had been exposed by erosion. It curved out of the slope like a gnarled arm, anchored deep into the earth. She tested it with her full weight. Solid. The cub watched intently as Amber looped the rope around the root, tied a figure-8 knot, and pulled it tight. She clipped her descender to her harness and threaded the rope through. Her hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over. Knot. Check. Carabiner. Check. Backup knot. Check. Above her, bird calls suddenly cut off. The forest went silent. Amber froze, rope in hand. She looked up into the canopy but saw only fog and pine branches. The silence felt heavy, wrong. Birds didn't just stop singing unless something scared them. Something big. The cub whimpered and pressed against Amber's leg. "Stay here," Amber said quietly. "I need you to stay right here at the edge where I can see you. Can you do that?" The cub chirped once. Amber chose to believe that meant yes. She wrapped the rope around her hand and positioned herself at the ravine's edge. But before she started her descent, a question nagged at her. Why was a panda here at all? Pandas belonged in China, in bamboo forests thousands of miles away. They didn't just appear in the Olympic Mountains. Someone had brought them. A research facility, maybe? A wildlife sanctuary? But if that was true, where were the handlers? Where was the search team? Unless no one knew they were missing yet. Amber swallowed hard. That meant she was the mother's only chance. She leaned back into her harness and let the rope take her weight. The descent started smooth, her boots finding purchase on the slope. But 3 feet down, the ground gave way. Pine needles and loose rock cascaded into the ravine below. Amber swung hard to the left, slamming into the slope with her shoulder. Pain bloomed hot and sharp. "Come on," she hissed through clenched teeth. She found a stable foothold and continued down. The fog seemed thicker here, pressing in from all sides. The temperature kept dropping. Her breath came out in visible puffs. Above her, the cub's silhouette appeared at the edge, backlit by the gray morning light. 15 feet. 20. Amber's arms burned from controlling the descent. Small rocks tumbled past her, dislodged by the rope's friction against the slope. Below, the mother panda hadn't moved. Her sides still rose and fell, but slower now. Slower. Movement flickered in Amber's peripheral vision, something dark shifting through the trees on the opposite side of the ravine. She turned her head sharply but saw nothing, just fog and shadows playing tricks, or something watching. Amber descended faster, technique giving way to urgency. The rope slid through her hands in controlled bursts. 30 feet, 35. Her boots hit the bottom of the ravine with a jarring impact that rattled her knees. She'd made it. The mother panda lay 5 feet away, trapped beneath 3 massive boulders. Up close, the damage looked even worse. The trapped leg was twisted beyond anything Amber had seen. Dark fluid gathered in the cracks between rocks. The panda's breathing hitched, stopped, then started again with a wet rattle. "Above!" the cub cried out. The sound echoed off the ravine walls, mournful and desperate. Amber looked up and saw the small shape leaning over the edge, watching her mother with those dark, impossibly expressive eyes. "I've got her," Amber called up, hoping the cub understood her tone if not her words. "I promise." She turned to the suffering panda and knelt beside her massive head. This close, Amber could smell iron and earth and something else. Fear. The panda's eye cracked open slightly, unfocused, and found Amber's face. Amber placed her hand gently on the panda's shoulder. "Hold on," she whispered. "Just hold on." Amber pulled on her work gloves and took in the full scope of the disaster. This wasn't just a rockfall. Behind the trapped panda, partially hidden by debris and fog, she could make out the mouth of a cave. The entrance had collapsed inward, bringing down what looked like reinforced wooden beams and metal framework. This had been a structure once, man-made. She moved closer, careful not to disturb the unstable rocks. Through gaps in the rubble, she spotted the remnants of a wire fence, twisted and buried. A faded sign clung to one of the broken posts. She wiped away dirt with her thumb and read the letters: Olympic Wildlife, Research Reserve, authorized personnel only. A sanctuary. Someone had built a shelter here and brought these pandas to it. But when? And why was it abandoned? No time for answers. The mother panda's breathing hitched again, that horrible wet sound that meant her airway was compromised. Amber knelt beside the massive head and gently tilted it to the side, checking for obstructions. The panda's tongue was pale, almost gray. Oxygen deprivation. Her pulse fluttered weakly beneath Amber's fingers when she pressed against the neck. "You're still here," Amber said softly. "That's good. That means we can fix this." She moved to the boulders, pinning the panda's body. 3 of them, each easily 300 pounds. The largest one pressed directly across the panda's leg and lower ribcage, restricting her ability to draw full breaths. The second boulder trapped her shoulder. The third had rolled against the cave entrance, sealing off what might have been an escape route. Amber grabbed the edge of the largest boulder and pulled. It didn't budge. She tried again, planting her feet and using her legs. Nothing. The rock was wedged too tightly against the others. Above, the cub's whimper echoed down the ravine walls. The sound bounced off stone, amplifying into something that felt alive, present. The mother panda's ear twitched at the noise. Her eye opened slightly, searching. "Your baby's safe," Amber told her. "She's the one who brought me here. Bravest little thing I've ever seen." The panda's eye closed again. Amber noticed deep claw marks gouged into the dirt around the trapped leg. 4 parallel lines, each an inch deep. The mother had tried to dig herself free, had probably been trying for hours before exhaustion and injury won. Amber's chest tightened. She knew that kind of desperation, knew what it felt like to claw at impossible situations while time slipped away. The memory hit her before she could stop it. Not Colorado this time. Earlier, her freshman year of college. A friend collapsing at a party while Amber stood frozen in the doorway, phone in hand, unable to make her fingers dial 911. She'd hesitated for maybe 10 seconds. 10 seconds that felt like 10 years. By the time she'd finally called, by the time paramedics arrived, it was already out of her hands. The doctors said it probably wouldn't have mattered, that the damage was done before Amber even found her. But Amber had never forgiven herself for those 10 seconds of paralysis. She'd promised herself after that funeral that she would never hesitate again. When someone needed help, you moved. You acted. You didn't freeze. Amber shook her head hard and refocused on the panda. Not this time. This time she would be fast enough. She pulled her climbing pick from her belt and examined the boulder configuration more carefully. The rocks were wedged together, but there was a narrow gap near the panda's shoulder blade. If she could widen it even slightly, it might relieve enough pressure to let the panda breathe more easily. Amber wedged the pick into the gap and pulled. The tool bit into stone with a grinding screech. She threw her full weight behind it. The gap widened half an inch. Another pull, another inch. The mother panda's breathing deepened slightly, her sides expanding a fraction more. "There you go," Amber breathed. "That's it." A deep rumble echoed through the ravine. Amber froze, pick still in hand. The sound came from above and inside the earth at the same time. She looked up and watched as a fist-sized rock detached from the ravine wall and tumbled down, bouncing off the slope before splashing into a puddle near her feet. The rocks were shifting. The cub's whimpering grew louder, more frantic. Amber glanced up and saw the small shape silhouetted against the gray sky, pacing back and forth at the edge. Another rumble. This one lasted longer. More debris rained down, pebbles and dirt cascading over the edge. Amber worked faster. She repositioned the pick and pulled again, muscles screaming. The gap widened another precious inch. She could fit her hand through now. She felt along the panda's shoulder, checking for damage, for breaks. The bone felt intact, but the tissue was badly bruised. Another rumble, longer this time. The boulder near Amber's feet shifted slightly, settling deeper with a grinding crunch. This whole ravine was unstable. One wrong move and the entire wall could come down on top of them. Amber's heart hammered. She needed help. She needed equipment. She needed a team with winches and medical supplies, and time they didn't have. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. No signal. Not even a single bar. Of course not. They were at the bottom of a ravine in the middle of nowhere. The cub cried out again, but this time the sound was different. Not mournful, alarmed. Amber looked up sharply. Gravel scattered down the ravine wall in a shower of small stones. Not from erosion, from weight, from something moving along the edge above, dislodging loose rock with each step. The growl she'd heard earlier came again. Closer now. Much closer, and this time it was accompanied by another sound, panting, multiple sets of lungs breathing hard in the cold air. Amber's blood went cold. She turned slowly, scanning the fog above. Dark shapes moved through the mist along the ravine's edge. 4 of them, maybe 5, low to the ground, lean and hungry. The cub screamed. What did it see? Before we continue, you and most people watching right now might never see another video from this channel, all because they forgot to subscribe. So please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. It is literally the only way you tell me that the hours researching, writing, and editing these stories was worth it. Now, let's get back to the story. Amber made her decision in half a heartbeat. She couldn't climb out in time. She couldn't outrun whatever was circling above, but she could make herself a harder target. She squeezed through the narrow gap she'd created near the cave entrance, pushing past broken beams and twisted metal framework. The space beyond was cramped, barely tall enough for her to crouch. The remains of what had once been a wildlife shelter stretched back into darkness. She'd have cover here, protection, maybe enough to buy time. The temperature dropped immediately. 10 degrees, 20. The cold pressed against her skin like something physical. Wind moaned through cracks in the collapsed rock face, carrying with it the smell of damp earth and decay. Amber's breath came out in thick clouds. She turned back to the mother panda. Most of the massive body was still outside, trapped beneath the boulders, but the head and front legs were close enough to the cave entrance that Amber could reach them. She knelt beside the panda's face and placed both hands gently on the broad skull. The panda's breathing had gotten worse, much worse. Each inhale was a struggle, sides barely moving. Amber had seen this before in injured hikers. Compromised oxygen, fluid building in the lungs. The panda had less than an hour, maybe less than 30 minutes. "Hey," Amber whispered. "Look at me." The panda's eye cracked open, unfocused at first, then slowly finding Amber's face. "I need you to hold on a little longer. Can you do that?" Amber unscrewed her water bottle and cupped her hand beneath the opening, letting it fill with cold water. She brought her palm to the panda's mouth and let the water trickle between the dark lips. Most of it spilled, but some made it through. The panda's tongue moved weakly, accepting the moisture. Amber refilled her hand and tried again. This time the panda responded more deliberately, lapping at the water with effort. When Amber pulled her hand back, the massive head followed slightly, pressing against her palm. The gesture was so gentle, so trusting, that Amber's throat tightened. "I know," she said quietly. "I know you're scared, but I promise you something right now. I'm not leaving. I'm not going anywhere until you're safe. Do you hear me? I'm staying right here." The panda exhaled slowly. Her eye closed again, but the tension in her body seemed to ease slightly. Trust. Despite everything, this wild animal was choosing to trust her. Amber pulled her emergency radio from her pack. The unit was designed for backcountry communication, supposed to work even without cell service. She extended the antenna and switched it to the emergency channel. "This is Amber Wilson on the Olympic Mountain Trail System. I have a critical wildlife situation and need immediate assistance. Multiple injured animals, unstable terrain, possible predators in the area. Does anyone copy?" Static hissed back at her. She adjusted the frequency and tried again. "This is Amber Wilson requesting emergency support. Does anyone read me?" More static. She checked the signal indicator. 0 bars. The ravine was too deep, the rock walls too thick. No signal was getting through. She was on her own. Above her, the cub's cries had turned frantic. Sharp, desperate. Amber's stomach knotted. She needed to do something about those rocks. Needed to free the mother enough to at least move her further into the cave where there was protection. She crawled back to where the largest boulder pressed against the panda's rib cage. If she could shift it even 6 inches to the left, it would release the pressure on the lungs. She positioned herself against a support beam, planted her feet on the boulder's face, and pushed with everything she had. The rock groaned, shifted slightly. Dust rained down from the cave ceiling. Amber pushed harder. Her thigh muscles burned. Her back screamed. The boulder moved another inch, grinding against its neighbors with a sound like grinding metal. Then the world came apart. The boulder she'd moved triggered a chain reaction. Smaller rocks that had been wedged above it lost their support and tumbled down. One struck the second boulder. That boulder shifted. More debris fell. The entire rock pile was collapsing inward, rearranging itself with terrible momentum. "No, no, no!" Amber threw herself over the panda's head, arms wrapped around the massive skull as rocks crashed down around them. Dust exploded into the air, thick and choking. She couldn't see, couldn't breathe, just held on and prayed the cave entrance wouldn't seal completely. The avalanche stopped as suddenly as it started. Amber coughed violently, dust coating her throat. She blinked tears from her eyes and looked up. The gap she'd created was gone. The boulders had settled into a new configuration, even more tightly wedged than before. But miraculously, the pressure on the panda's chest had released. The mother's sides expanded fully for the first time, drawing in a deep, ragged breath. Small victories. The cub screamed above them, not a whimper this time. A full-throated cry of terror. Amber scrambled to the cave entrance and peered up through the narrow opening. The fog had started to lift slightly, revealing more of the ravine walls. And there, silhouetted against the gray sky, she saw them clearly for the first time. 5 lean shapes paced along the ridge. Jackals, mountain jackals, bigger than coyotes, desperate and hungry. They'd found the scent of vulnerability and injury, and now they were closing in on the easiest target, the cub. One of the jackals broke from the pack and started down the slope toward where the baby panda stood frozen at the edge. The others followed, spreading out, working as a coordinated unit. Then, from somewhere deeper in the forest, A new sound cut through the air. A howl, long and mournful, and answered by another. And another. Amber's hands went numb. Those weren't jackals. Those were wolves. Would you stay to protect that cub, or save yourself? Drop your answer in the comments, and share this with someone who loves animal rescue stories. They need to see what happens next. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the moment everything changes. Amber grabbed the rope and hauled herself up the ravine wall. Her shoulders screamed. Her hands were raw inside the gloves. She didn't care. The cub was up there alone, exposed, with predators closing in from 2 directions. She climbed faster than was safe, boots slipping on loose rock, fingers clawing for purchase. The rope bit into her palms even through the gloves. 20 feet, 30. Her lungs burned. Below her, the mother panda's labored breathing echoed up from the cave. Above her, the cub's cries had gone silent. That silence was worse than screaming. Amber pulled herself over the edge and rolled onto solid ground. She jumped to her feet, scanning the area. The cub stood exactly where Amber had left her, small body, rigid, staring at something in the tree line. The wolves emerged from the fog like ghosts taking form. 5 of them, gray and black and lean to the point of starvation, ribs visible beneath matted fur, eyes bright and calculating. They moved with the coordinated precision of a pack that had hunted together for years. The alpha, a massive gray male, led the formation. The others spread out in a semicircle, cutting off escape routes. They'd sensed the weakness. They knew exactly what waited at the bottom of that ravine. Amber positioned herself between the wolves and the cub. The baby panda immediately pressed against her leg, trembling so hard Amber could feel it through her pants. The cub made a soft, chittering sound, barely audible. "Get back!" Amber shouted. Her voice sounded small against the vast silence of the mountains. The wolves didn't react, didn't even blink. They just watched, waited, assessed. Amber grabbed her hiking pole and extended it to full length. She raised it above her head with both hands, making herself as large as possible. The movement was supposed to intimidate predators, make them think twice about engaging with something that might fight back. The alpha tilted his head slightly, almost curious. "I said get back." Amber swung the pole in a wide arc. The wolves took a single step backward, 1 step, then stopped. The alpha's ears swiveled forward, analyzing. His lips pulled back slightly, exposing teeth that signaled the threat clearly. Amber's heart hammered against her ribs. The cub whimpered and pressed harder against her leg. The wolves tested them. The one on the far left crept forward 3 steps, stopped, waited for a reaction. When Amber swung the pole in his direction, he retreated, but the one on the right advanced while she was distracted. When she turned to face him, the left one moved forward again. They were probing her defenses, looking for weakness, for hesitation. Amber planted her feet and held the pole steady. Her arms were already shaking from the climb. She couldn't keep this up for long. The wolves knew it. She could see it in their eyes. That patient calculation. They had time. She didn't. "Come on," she whispered to herself. "Think." She couldn't fight 5 wolves. She couldn't outrun them. The cub would never make it down the rope into the ravine before the wolves closed in. And even if they did make it down, they'd be trapped with an injured panda and no way out. The alpha took another step forward. Closer now. Close enough that Amber could see the scars crisscrossing his muzzle. Old wounds from old fights. This wolf was experienced. Dangerous. Amber reached down and grabbed a rock the size of her fist. She hurled it at the alpha's head. The wolf dodged easily, almost lazily, but the movement gave her an idea. She grabbed another rock and threw it at the wolf on the left, then another at the right, then back to the alpha. Keep them moving, keep them off balance, make them think she was more dangerous than she looked. It worked for maybe 30 seconds. Then the alpha sat down. Just sat, right there on the trail, 20 feet away. The others followed his lead, settling onto their haunches in a loose perimeter. They weren't leaving, they were waiting. Amber's stomach dropped. This was worse than aggression. Wolves that attacked immediately could be scared off. Wolves that waited were confident. They'd decided she wasn't a real threat. They were just biding time until exhaustion or desperation made her vulnerable. She couldn't stay up here. The mother panda below was fading, but she couldn't leave the cub alone either. "Okay," Amber breathed. "Okay, new plan." She knelt down and scooped the cub into her arms. The baby panda weighed maybe 30 pounds, all compact muscle and soft fur. The cub chirped anxiously but didn't struggle. Amber backed toward the rope, keeping her eyes on the wolves. The alpha stood. The others stood. They matched her movement step for step. Amber reached the edge of the ravine. She'd have to descend one-handed while holding the cub. It was dangerous, possibly impossible. But what choice did she have? She clipped the cub's fur to her jacket using a carabiner, creating a makeshift carrier. The cub clung to her neck, tiny paws digging in. Amber grabbed the rope with her free hand and started backing down. The wolves moved forward, faster now. No, no, no. Amber descended as quickly as she dared. 5 feet. 10. The rope burned through her glove. Above her, the alpha appeared at the edge of the ravine, looking down. He made a sound, something between a growl and a bark. A signal. Amber looked up. Her blood went cold. The wolves weren't backing off. They were moving along the ravine edge, spreading out, circling, looking for another way down. They weren't giving up. They were hunting. Have you ever been hunted? Tell me in the comments. And hit that share button. Your friends need to see how this ends. Subscribe now. You won't believe what the cub does next. Amber hit the bottom of the ravine hard, boots slamming into rock. The cub clung to her neck, trembling against her chest. Above them, the wolves' silhouettes moved along the ridge, dark shapes testing the edges, searching for a path down. She unclipped the cub and set her down gently. The baby immediately scrambled toward the cave entrance where her mother lay trapped. Amber followed, dropping to her knees beside the massive head. The panda's breathing had deteriorated again, shallow, rattling. Time was running out. "I'm back," Amber whispered, placing her hand on the panda's forehead. "Just hold on a little longer." She turned her attention to the boulders. The earlier rock slide had rearranged everything, but maybe that meant there were new weak points, new angles she could exploit. She grabbed a smaller rock near the entrance and tried to wedge it under the largest boulder, creating leverage. The rock slipped, skittered away. Useless. Amber repositioned herself and tried again with a different stone. This one held. She found another, then another, building a small cairn that might give her enough purchase to shift the main boulder. She pressed her shoulder against it and pushed. Nothing. She pushed harder, muscles screaming, face flushed with effort. The boulder shifted a fraction of an inch. Then the world started shaking. A deep rumble rolled through the earth, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The sound vibrated in Amber's bones, in her teeth. The cave walls trembled. Dust began raining from the ceiling in thin streams. "No," Amber breathed. "Not now." The rumble grew louder, deeper. The ground beneath her feet shuddered violently. This wasn't settling debris. This was something else. A tremor. An aftershock from some distant seismic event that had destabilized this entire slope. The ravine walls began to move. Rocks that had been stable for centuries suddenly weren't. They shifted, groaned, started to separate. Above her, Amber heard the wolves yelp in alarm as the ground beneath them rolled. Then the collapse began. Stones broke free from the ravine walls and plummeted down. Small ones at first, the size of baseballs, cracking against the ground around her. Then larger ones, basketball-sized. One slammed into the ground 3 feet from Amber's head, shattering on impact. "Get in!" Amber screamed at the cub. She grabbed the baby and shoved her deeper into the cave entrance, toward the mother's body. More rocks fell. A boulder the size of a refrigerator broke loose from the wall and crashed down, narrowly missing the cave entrance. The impact sent shockwaves through the ground. Amber's teeth rattled. She threw herself over the mother panda's head, arms wrapped around the massive skull, making her body a shield. Rocks hammered down around them. One struck Amber's backpack, driving the air from her lungs. Another glanced off her shoulder. Pain exploded white-hot down her arm. The cub screamed, high-pitched, terrified. Dust clouds erupted from everywhere at once, thick and choking. Amber squeezed her eyes shut and pressed her face against the panda's fur, trying to filter the air through the dense coat. She couldn't see, couldn't breathe, could only hold on and pray that the cave entrance wouldn't collapse completely. The rumbling went on forever. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Each second marked by the crash of falling stone. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind had died. Amber lay still, lungs heaving, heart hammering. She could feel the mother panda's chest rising and falling beneath her. Still alive, both of them still alive. She lifted her head slowly, blinked through the dust. Her eyes burned. Her throat felt raw and scraped. The world was a gray haze, visibility down to maybe 3 feet. "Cub?" Her voice came out as a croak. "Where are you?" A soft chirp answered from deeper in the cave. Relief flooded through Amber. The baby was okay, but as the dust began to settle, Amber saw what the collapse had done. A massive boulder, easily 500 pounds, had rolled directly into the cave entrance. It sealed off most of the opening, leaving only a narrow gap near the top, barely wide enough for Amber to squeeze through. The space inside the cave had shrunk dramatically. What had been cramped before was now suffocating. Worse, the airflow had been cut off. The wind that had been whistling through cracks was gone. The temperature inside the cave was already rising from their combined body heat, and the oxygen would deplete fast with 3 of them breathing in this sealed space. Amber checked her watch. They had maybe 20 minutes of breathable air, 30 if they stayed calm and didn't exert themselves. She moved carefully toward the new boulder, testing its stability. As she shifted her weight, the ground beneath her right foot suddenly gave way. Amber's leg plunged into empty space. She threw her arms out, catching herself on the cave floor. Her leg dangled into darkness, into some kind of void that hadn't been there before. The aftershock had opened a secondary fissure, a crack in the earth that dropped straight down into nothing. She scrambled backward, heart in her throat, pulling her leg free. Rocks tumbled into the fissure. She listened for them to hit bottom. 1 second, 2, 3, 4. The rocks never made a sound. Amber stared at the new crack in the floor. It was maybe 2 feet wide, running from the cave entrance toward the back wall. One wrong step and any of them could fall into that darkness and never be seen again. She pressed her back against the cave wall and forced herself to breathe slowly. Assess, adapt, survive. The wolves were still up there somewhere, probably scattered by the aftershock, but definitely not gone. The mother panda was fading fast. The cub was trapped with her. The cave entrance was sealed. The oxygen was depleting. And now there was a bottomless pit in the middle of their only shelter. Amber looked at the mother panda's face. The massive eyes were open, watching her, waiting to see what she would do. The rescue window hadn't just shrunk, it had slammed shut. But Amber had made a promise, and she'd meant every word. Amber pressed her ear against the narrow gap at the top of the cave entrance, listening. The dust had settled outside, revealing the aftermath of the collapse. Rocks lay scattered across the ravine floor. The rope still hung against the wall, somehow undamaged. And somewhere above, movement. The cub shrieked, not from inside the cave, from outside. Amber's stomach dropped. She spun around, searching the shadows. The cub wasn't pressed against her mother anymore. The small shape was squeezing through the gap in the boulders, climbing toward the opening. No, stay here. Amber lunged forward, but the cub was already through, scrambling up the rock pile toward the ravine's edge. Another shriek echoed down. This one was pure terror, Amber didn't think. She grabbed the rope and hauled herself up the wall for the second time. Her injured shoulder screamed in protest. Her hands were raw inside her gloves, leaving dark stains on the kermantle. She didn't care. That cub had saved her mother's life by finding Amber. Amber refused to let the wolves take her now. She pulled herself over the edge and froze. The wolves had returned. All 5 of them. But the aftershock had changed them. They moved differently now, agitated and unsettled. Their ears flicked constantly, listening for another tremor. Their eyes darted between the cub and the tree line, calculating new risks. But hunger overrode caution. They crept forward, hackles raised, teeth bared. The scent of the wounded from the wounded panda below was driving them wild. The cub stood at the edge of the ravine, trapped between the drop behind her and the wolves in front. She rose up on her hind legs, trying to make herself bigger, trying to be brave, but she was so small, so impossibly small. The alpha wolf was 3 times her size. Amber stepped between them. "Back off!" She reached into her pack and pulled out her emergency flare. The red cylinder was cold in her palm. She'd been saving it, hoping she wouldn't need it. That hope was dead now. The wolves paused. The alpha's eyes locked onto Amber. Recognition flickered there. She was the same human who'd driven them back before, but they'd tested her already. They knew she was alone, knew she was tired, and the aftershock had scattered any other potential threats in the area. They were done being patient. The cub chirped frantically and pressed against Amber's leg. Then, in a gesture that broke Amber's heart, the baby tried to imitate her. The cub stood tall, paws together, trying to look big and intimidating, but the movement only emphasized how vulnerable she was, how defenseless. The wolf on the left took 3 quick steps forward. The one on the right mirrored him. They were coordinating again, working as a pack. Amber yanked off her backpack and swung it in a wide arc. 40 pounds of gear and supplies whistled through the air. The closest wolf jumped back, startled. Amber swung again, stepping forward, shouting at the top of her lungs. "Get out of here, go." The wolves retreated 3 steps, stopped, watched. Amber grabbed a rock from the ground and hurled it, hit the alpha square in the shoulder. He yelped but didn't run. She threw another. Rocks scattered the pack, buying her seconds of space. Not minutes, seconds. Her hand found another rock. She wound up to throw it. The alpha lunged. He moved faster than seemed possible, closing the distance in 2 bounds. Amber stumbled backward, dropping the rock. The wolf's jaws snapped inches from her face. She could smell his breath, hot and rank, could see the desperation in his eyes. Amber struck the flare's ignition cap against the ground. Red fire exploded to life, hissing and spitting sparks. She thrust it toward the alpha's face. The wolf recoiled, yelping, eyes wide. The bright crimson light reflected off his retinas. He scrambled backward, confused by the sudden flame. Amber waved the flare in wide circles, creating a barrier of fire and light. The wolves backed off, spooked by the unnatural brightness. But they didn't run. They just moved beyond the flare's range and regrouped. The cub huddled against Amber's legs, making herself as small as possible. Amber could feel the baby's rapid heartbeat against her calf. "It's okay," Amber whispered, not sure if she was comforting the cub or herself. "I've got you." But even as she said it, she saw the flare's flame begin to sputter. These things only burned for 15 minutes. She'd already used 3, maybe 4. How much time did she have left? 5 minutes? 6? The wolves saw it too. They sat down again, just like before. Waiting, patient. The alpha licked his scarred muzzle and settled onto his haunches, eyes never leaving Amber's face. The internal voice Amber had been fighting finally broke through. "You're going to fail again! Just like Colorado! Just like college! You're going to watch something be lost because you weren't fast enough. Weren't strong enough. Weren't enough." "No," she said aloud. The word came out harsh, desperate. Not this time, but she knew the truth. She couldn't climb down with the cub while holding a flare. She couldn't fight off 5 wolves by herself. She couldn't save the mother and protect the baby and survive this all at once. She'd have to choose, and no matter what she chose, someone wouldn't make it out. The flare sputtered again. The flame dropped to half its previous height. The wolves stood up. They began moving forward, spreading out into a wider circle, cutting off escape routes. The alpha's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. He knew. They all knew. The hunt was almost over. Amber gripped the flare tighter, knuckles white. The cub pressed harder against her leg. Below them, from the depths of the ravine, the mother panda's labored breathing echoed up through stone. The alpha took another step, then another. The flare flickered, dimmed. The red light turned orange, then yellow. Then it went out. What would you do with no weapons and no way out? Comment below. And share this story. People need to know what happened on that mountain. Subscribe right now. What the cub does next will leave you speechless. Darkness swallowed the mountain. Without the flare, the world shrank to shadows and movement. Amber's eyes struggled to adjust. The wolves were just dark shapes now, circling closer. She could hear their breathing, the soft pad of paws on stone, the click of claws. The alpha moved first. He came in low and fast, a blur of gray fur and bared teeth, aimed for Amber's leg, the exposed hamstring. A decisive strike meant to end the fight instantly. Amber saw it coming, tried to twist away, too slow. The wolf's jaws opened wide. Then, something small and black and white launched through the air like a missile. The cub hit the alpha square in the face with every ounce of her 30 pounds. Tiny jaws clamped down on the wolf's muzzle. The baby panda screamed, a sound so loud and piercing it seemed impossible that it came from something so small. The cry echoed off the ravine walls, amplified and multiplied until it filled the entire valley. The alpha wolf yelped in shock and pain. He tried to shake the cub off, but she held on with desperate strength. Her little paws flailed wildly, claws raking across his face. She thrashed like something possessed, all instinct and fury and protection. The other wolves froze, confused. This wasn't how prey behaved. Prey ran. Prey cowered. Prey didn't attack. Amber snapped out of her shock. She grabbed the cub and yanked her backward, pulling her away from the alpha's snapping jaws. The wolf stumbled, disoriented, dark marks visible across his muzzle. "You brave, crazy little thing," Amber breathed, but there was no time to celebrate. She fumbled in her pack for her second flare, the backup she'd almost forgotten about. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped it. The wolves were recovering, regrouping. The alpha shook his head violently, clearing his vision. Amber struck the flare's ignition cap. Nothing happened. She struck it again, harder. Sparks flew, but no flame caught. "Come on, come on, come on!" She hit it a third time, scraping it against rock. The flare burst to life with a whoosh of red fire. Amber thrust it forward just as the alpha prepared to charge again. The wolf pulled up short, eyes reflecting the crimson light. She swung the flare in wild arcs, creating a wall of flame between them and the pack. "Back! Get back!" Her voice was raw, breaking. The wolves retreated several steps. But this time they didn't sit. They paced restlessly, agitated by the cub's attack. The alpha growled low and continuous, a sound that vibrated in Amber's chest. He was done playing, Done testing. The next attack would be final. But something had shifted. That moment when the cub had launched herself at a predator 3 times her size had changed the equation. The wolves were wary now. Uncertain. This tiny animal that should have been easy prey had fought back with shocking ferocity. And somewhere deep in their predator brains, doubt crept in. Was this worth it? Amber felt it too. A flicker of something that felt dangerously close to hope. She pulled the cub closer, holding her against her chest. The baby's heart hammered like a drum. Her little body trembled with adrenaline. "You saved my life," Amber whispered into the soft fur. "You saved both of us." The cub chirped weakly and nuzzled against Amber's neck. Then, from the depths of the ravine below, a sound echoed up through the darkness. A deep, resonant bellow. Weak but unmistakable. The mother panda. She'd heard her baby's scream, had recognized it even through the stone and distance, and somehow, despite being crushed beneath boulders and barely able to breathe, she'd found the strength to call back. The cub went rigid in Amber's arms. She chirped frantically in response, trying to answer her mother. The exchange lasted only seconds, but Amber felt the emotion of it like a physical force. A mother and child, separated by rock and injury and impossible circumstances, still reaching for each other. The wolves heard it too. Their ears pricked forward. The alpha took a step toward the ravine edge, peering down into the darkness. The scent of the wounded down there was overwhelming now, mixing with the cold mountain air. Amber saw the calculation happening in real time. 2 potential targets. One up here, protected by fire and proven to be dangerous. One down there, helpless and fading. Which was worth the risk? The alpha made a decision. He turned away from Amber and padded toward a section of ravine wall that had collapsed during the aftershock, creating a crude slope. A path down. "No," Amber breathed. "Don't you dare." But the wolf was already descending, picking his way carefully down the rubble. 2 others followed. The remaining 2 stayed above, watching Amber, pinning her in place. Amber looked at her flare. The flame had already dropped to half strength. This one wouldn't last any longer than the first. 8 minutes. Maybe 10. And when it died, the 2 wolves above would attack, while their packmates overwhelmed the helpless mother below. The cub seemed to understand. She struggled in Amber's arms, desperate to get to her mother, to protect her the same way she'd protected Amber. But Amber held firm. "I know," she said quietly. "I know you want to help her, but I need you to trust me one more time." She looked at the rope still hanging against the ravine wall, looked at the flare in her hand, looked at the 2 wolves watching her with patient, hungry eyes. An idea formed. Reckless, probably suicidal, but it was the only one she had. Amber clipped the cub back onto her jacket, grabbed the rope with one hand, held the flare with the other. The wolves above tensed, sensing something was about to happen. "Hold on tight," Amber told the cub. Then she jumped. She dropped straight down into the ravine, rope screaming through her grip, flare trailing sparks. The 2 wolves above barked in surprise. Below, the 3 wolves descending the slope looked up, confused by the human falling toward them like a meteor. Amber hit the ravine floor hard. Her knees buckled. The impact drove the air from her lungs, but she kept the flare raised high, and the wolves at the bottom scattered, startled by her sudden appearance. She'd bought herself maybe 30 seconds of confusion. 30 seconds before they realized she was trapped down here with them. The flare flickered, dimmed. The flame was dying fast, burning out in the oxygen-depleted air of the ravine. Above, the 2 remaining wolves appeared at the edge, looking down. Below, the 3 wolves recovered and began circling. 5 wolves, 1 dying flare, and a promise Amber refused to break. The flame sputtered one last time. "Would you jump into a pit of wolves to save a panda?" Tell me in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to see real courage. And subscribe. What happens in the next 60 seconds will shock you. Let's get back to the story. The flare died. Amber stood in complete darkness, 5 wolves circling her position. She could hear their breathing, their footsteps, the low growls building in their throats. The cub pressed against her chest, silent now, as if she knew making noise would trigger the attack. Amber gripped her knife. 6 inches of steel against 5 predators. The math didn't work. But she'd made a promise, and promises weren't negotiable. The alpha moved first. She heard him shift his weight, preparing to lunge. Then the mountain exploded with sound. Leaves rustled violently. Branches snapped. Voices shouted from multiple directions at once. "There! Down in the ravine!" I see movement, multiple heat signatures. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness like searchlights, crisscrossing the ravine walls. The wolves yelped in confusion, blinded by the sudden light. Heavy footsteps crashed through the underbrush above. Lots of them. "Get out of here!" A man's voice boomed with authority. "Go on, get!" Something whistled through the air. A small object hit the ground near the alpha and exploded with a sharp crack. A firecracker. Another followed. Then another. The wolves scattered, overwhelmed by noise and light and the sudden appearance of multiple humans. The alpha tried to rally his pack, barking commands, but 2 more firecrackers exploded near his position. He broke, turned, and ran, the others following. Within seconds they'd vanished into the trees, their howls fading into the distance. Amber's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, still clutching the cub. Her entire body shook. "We've got you," a woman's voice called down. "Amber Wilson?" "Yeah," Amber managed. Her voice sounded like gravel. "How did you—" "Automated trail cameras picked up movement 2 hours ago. We've been searching since then." Ropes dropped down the ravine walls. 3 people rappelled down with practiced efficiency. They wore matching jackets with Olympic Wildlife Research Reserve printed across the backs. The first one to reach her was a woman in her 40s, athletic build, kind eyes. "I'm Dr. Chan. Are you injured?" "Not me. The pandas." Amber pointed toward the cave entrance. "The mother's trapped. Pinned leg, low oxygen. I don't know how much time." "We've got it, doctor." Chan spoke into her radio. "Confirmed. 2 giant pandas. 1 adult female. Critical condition. 1 juvenile. Appears stable. Need veterinary transport immediately." More people rappelled down. 6, 8, 10. They moved with coordinated precision, setting up equipment faster than Amber thought possible. Portable lights illuminated the ravine. Someone handed her a water bottle. Someone else wrapped a thermal blanket around her shoulders. A younger man, maybe 30, knelt beside her. "I'm Marcus. Can I take the cub? We need to examine her." Amber looked down at the baby panda, still clinging to her jacket. "She won't leave her mother. We'll keep them together. I promise." Amber carefully unclipped the cub and handed her over. The baby chirped anxiously but didn't struggle. Marcus cradled her gently, speaking in soft, soothing tones as he carried her toward the cave entrance. Dr. Chan helped Amber to her feet. "Can you walk?" "I can help. You've done more than enough," I promised her. Amber's voice came out harder than intended. "I promised I wouldn't leave until she was safe." Dr. Chan studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Okay. Stay close to me." They moved to the cave entrance where the team was already working on the boulder configuration. Someone had brought a portable winch system. Another person operated a jackhammer-like device that shattered rocks into manageable pieces. The noise was deafening, but controlled, precise. Amber pointed out the air gap she'd created earlier. "There. If you can widen that section, you'll relieve pressure on her chest." A man with a crowbar moved to the spot she indicated. He wedged the tool in and pulled. The gap widened 6 inches. The mother panda's breathing immediately deepened, sides expanding more fully. "Good call," he said to Amber. They worked in organized chaos. One team cleared debris, another operated the winch, a third prepared medical equipment. Dr. Chan crawled into the narrow space beside the mother panda, checking vital signs with practiced hands. "Pulse is weak but steady," she called out. "Severe dehydration, fractured femur. Possible internal trauma. We need to sedate her before we move her." A veterinarian appeared with a large syringe. He administered the sedative with careful precision, injecting it into the muscle of the mother's uninjured leg. Within minutes, the panda's eyes drooped. Her breathing slowed to a deep, regular rhythm. "Okay, she's under. Let's move fast." The winch cables were attached to harnesses that they'd carefully worked beneath the mother's body. Commands were shouted. The winch motor whined. Slowly, incredibly slowly, the largest boulder began to lift. Amber held her breath. The boulder rose 1 inch, 2 inches, 6 inches. Enough clearance to slide the mother out. "Got her! Pull her clear!" 8 people grabbed the harness and pulled in unison. The mother panda slid free of the rocks, her massive body leaving a dark trail on the stone. They lowered her onto a specialized stretcher, wide and reinforced. The cub broke free from Marcus and scrambled to her mother's side. She climbed onto the stretcher and pressed herself against the mother's neck, tiny paws clutching at the thick fur. She chirped frantically, over and over, trying to wake her mother up. "It's okay, little one," Dr. Chan said softly. "She's just sleeping. She's going to be okay." But the cub wouldn't move, wouldn't let go. 2 team members tried to gently lift her away so they could work, but she clung tighter, screaming her distress. "Leave her," Amber said quietly. "She's been through enough." Dr. Chan nodded. They worked around the cub, checking the mother's injuries, stabilizing her leg with an inflatable splint, starting an IV line for fluids. The mother's breathing had normalized, strong and steady. The sedative had taken away her pain. Amber watched it all through a fog of exhaustion. Her legs felt like water. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Someone tried to lead her away, but she refused. "Not yet," she whispered. "Not until I know she'll make it." So she stood there, wrapped in a thermal blanket, watching the team work, watching the cub curl against her mother's body, watching the rise and fall of those massive sides, each breath a small miracle. Dr. Chan approached after 20 minutes. "We're ready to transport. The helicopter's waiting at the nearest clearing. We'll have her in surgery within the hour. What are her chances?" Dr. Chan paused. "Honestly, if you'd found her 2 hours later, we'd be having a very different conversation. But because of you," she smiled, "I'd say she's got a fighting chance. A fighting chance. Not a guarantee." But more than the mother had been given when Amber first looked into that ravine. The team lifted the stretcher and began the careful process of hauling it up the ravine wall using a pulley system. The cub rode along, still clinging to her mother's fur. Amber watched them ascend, 2 dark shapes rising toward the gray sky. When they disappeared over the edge, she finally let herself breathe. Then her knees buckled. Dr. Chan caught her. "Easy. When's the last time you ate?" Amber tried to remember. Couldn't. "What time is it?" Almost noon. She'd been out here for 7 hours. It felt like 7 years. They helped her into a harness and hauled her up. At the top, she collapsed onto solid ground and just lay there, staring at the sky. Clouds moved slowly overhead. Birds had started singing again. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the thump of helicopter rotors. Was this real? Had she actually done it? Or was she still down in that ravine, dying, hallucinating rescue? Dr. Chan's face appeared above her. "You still with me? Did I save her?" Amber asked. "Tell me the truth. You gave her a chance. That's more than anyone else could have done." Dr. Chan squeezed her shoulder. "Come on. Let's get you checked out." But as they helped Amber to her feet, a sound cut through the forest. Sharp, urgent, coming from where they'd loaded the pandas into the transport vehicle. The cub was screaming. And the medical team was shouting. Something had gone wrong. What just happened? Drop your prediction in the comments. And if this story gave you chills, share it right now. Subscribe. You need to see how this ends. Amber ran. Her exhausted legs found strength from somewhere deep and primal. She crashed through the group of researchers clustered around the transport vehicle, pushing past bodies until she could see what was happening. The mother panda lay on the specialized stretcher, still sedated. But her breathing had changed, rapid, shallow, her sides barely moving. The veterinarian had his stethoscope pressed against her chest, face tight with concentration. "Pneumothorax," he said sharply. "Collapsed lung. Probably happened during the move. We need to re-inflate it now, or we'll lose her." The team moved with controlled urgency. Someone handed him a long needle. He palpated the mother's ribcage, finding the precise location, then inserted the needle between two ribs. There was a horrible hissing sound as trapped air escaped the chest cavity. The mother's breathing hitched, stopped, started again, deeper this time, more regular. The veterinarian listened again with his stethoscope. 5 seconds, 10. Finally, he nodded. "We're good. Lungs re-inflated. But we need to move fast. Get her in the helicopter." They loaded the stretcher into the waiting aircraft. The cub scrambled aboard, refusing to be separated. The helicopter's rotors spun up to speed, whipping wind across the clearing. Then it lifted off, nose tilting forward, carrying the pandas toward the hidden rehabilitation center 15 miles away. Amber watched until the helicopter disappeared into the gray sky. Then she sat down hard on the ground and put her head in her hands. Dr. Chan sat beside her. "You okay? I almost lost her twice, but you didn't. She's going to make it, Amber. Because of you." Amber wanted to believe that, wanted to feel like a hero, but all she felt was exhausted and scared and impossibly small. "Come on," Dr. Chan said gently. "Let's get you home." 6 weeks later, Amber stood at the gates of the Olympic Wildlife Research Reserve. She'd been invited back. They wouldn't say why, only that she needed to see something. A young researcher named Maya met her at the entrance. "Miss Wilson, thank you for coming. Follow me, please." They walked through the facility, past veterinary labs and research offices, until they reached a secure door marked Rehabilitation Wing, Restricted Access. Maya swiped her badge, and the door clicked open. Inside was a large, naturalistic enclosure designed to look like a section of mountain forest. Bamboo grew in thick clusters. A small stream burbled through the center, and there, lying in a patch of sunlight, was the mother panda. Amber's breath caught. The mother was awake, alert, and she was standing. Her injured leg had been reconstructed with surgical pins and plates. She walked with a slight limp, testing her weight carefully, but she walked. Each step was steady and deliberate. She was eating bamboo, stripping the leaves with practiced efficiency. "She recovered faster than we expected," Maya said. "Pandas are incredibly resilient. The surgery went well, and she's been gaining strength every day." A blur of black and white shot across the enclosure. The cub, bigger now but still small, bounded toward the observation window. She pressed her paws against the glass, rose up on her hind legs, and stared directly at Amber. "She remembers you," Maya said softly. Maya opened a side door that led into the enclosure. "Come on. They've both been waiting." Amber stepped through hesitantly. The cub didn't hesitate. She sprinted across the grass and crashed into Amber's legs, wrapping her arms around them in what could only be described as a hug. The baby chirped frantically, a sound of pure joy, and nuzzled against Amber's knee. "Hey, brave girl," Amber whispered, kneeling down. Look at you, you got so big." The mother panda had stopped eating. She turned her massive head toward Amber, nostrils flaring, taking in the scent, processing. Then, slowly, she began walking toward them. Amber's heart pounded. She stayed very still, one hand on the cub as the mother approached. The huge panda moved with careful dignity, each step deliberate. She stopped 2 feet away and studied Amber's face with those dark, intelligent eyes. Then she leaned forward and gently nuzzled Amber's outstretched hand. The touch was soft, deliberate. The mother pressed her massive head against Amber's palm and exhaled slowly, a sound that might have been contentment, or gratitude, or recognition, she remembered. Tears blurred Amber's vision. She'd spent 6 weeks wondering if any of it mattered, if saving one animal made a difference in a world that felt too big and too broken. But feeling that gentle nuzzle against her hand, seeing the cub healthy and happy, watching the mother walk on a leg that should have killed her, it mattered. God, it mattered. "There's something else you need to see," Maya said. They returned to the research building. Maya led Amber to a conference room where a laptop sat open on the table. The automatic trail cameras we have positioned throughout the mountains captured everything. The footage went viral 3 weeks ago. Over 40 million views. She pressed play. The video started with the cub standing at the ravine's edge, Amber beside her, wolves circling. Amber watched herself swing the dying flare, saw the fear on her own face. Then the moment came, the wolf lunging, and the cub launching herself forward with shocking courage, biting down, screaming that piercing cry that echoed across the valley. The comments section scrolled past on the side of the screen. Thousands of them. "That baby panda has more courage than most people." "I'm crying. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. This woman risked everything for an animal she'd never met. That's a hero. The way the cub fought back, I've never seen anything like it." Maya paused the video. "The story's been covered by every major news outlet. People are calling it the most emotional wildlife rescue in years. But more importantly, it's brought attention to conservation efforts. Donations to wildlife reserves have tripled. Your story inspired people, Amber." Amber stared at the screen. That moment, frozen in time, the cub mid-leap, all fury and protection. She'd been so focused on survival that she hadn't realized what it meant. That tiny animal had saved her life, and in doing so, had shown the world what courage looked like when everything was on the line. "I thought I had to do it alone," Amber said quietly. "After Colorado, after everything, I thought asking for help was weakness. That's why I hiked alone, why I pushed people away." Maya smiled. "But you weren't alone out there. The cub helped you. We helped you. Even the mountain helped you by holding together just long enough." Amber thought about that. About the cub leading her to her mother. About the research team arriving at exactly the right moment. About the mother panda trusting her despite every instinct saying not to. She'd called for help in 100 small ways without realizing it. And the wilderness had answered back. She looked at Maya. "Can I come back? To visit them? Anytime you want. You're family now." Amber stood at the observation window one last time before leaving. The mother panda was teaching the cub how to climb a tree, supporting her from below when she slipped. The baby was fearless, just like she'd been that day on the mountain, just like she'd always be. Amber pressed her hand against the glass. The cub looked up, saw her, and waved one paw. An actual wave, like she was saying goodbye, or maybe see you soon. "Thank you," Amber whispered, "for trusting me, for being braver than I was, for reminding me what matters." The cub chirped once, then went back to climbing. Amber walked out of the research center into afternoon sunlight. The Olympic Mountains rose in the distance, wrapped in mist and mystery. Somewhere out there was that ravine, that cave, That moment when everything could have gone wrong but somehow went right. She pulled out her phone and looked at her hiking schedule. She'd been planning solo trips for the next 3 months, but maybe it was time to change that. Time to join a group again. Time to trust that she didn't have to carry every burden alone. The wilderness had taught her that. A tiny panda had taught her that. And maybe, finally, she was ready to learn. So let me ask you this. Would you have followed that cub into the unknown? Would you have jumped into a ravine full of wolves to save an animal you'd never met? Would you have kept fighting when every logical bone in your body said to give up? Tell me in the comments. I need to know, because stories like this, real stories about real courage, they matter. They remind us what we're capable of when everything's on the line. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes aren't born, they're made in moments of impossible choice. And subscribe, because I promise you this, there are more stories out there. More moments of courage captured by cameras and witnessed by mountains. More rescues that will break your heart and put it back together. Don't let this be the last one you see. Subscribe now. Share this story. Let's make sure that cub's bravery, that mother's survival, Amber's sacrifice, let's make sure none of it gets forgotten. The wilderness is still calling, and it has more stories to tell.